right, welcome into the Five Guys here on the Five Reasons YouTube channel. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick. And at Five Reasons Sports, we got our guy, Donno. You can follow him at Donno. I will get this microphone working here any second. We are sponsored here by our friends at Better Edge. Use the code 5RSN. Sign up today. Find the line that you want. If you use that code against the number 5RSN, you will get $20 to play. That's right. You'll get $20 to play. Alex, do you still hear me? That means that my mic is now working.
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay, sounds good. Go to betteredge.com. If you hear me, then go sign up. Also, we've got a really cool contest on there. We're doing a conference finals contest for the NBA, and our prizes. All you got to do is go on there and answer 10 questions. It's not complicated. I just posted it to the top of the Five Reasons Sports Twitter page, okay? The winner of the contest will get 5 Reasons gear plus a free annual subscription to either Off the Floor for the Miami Heat or OnlyFins about the Miami Dolphins. So free annual subscription to either, and the second place winner will just get a free subscription to either. So get on there. Again, that subscription is valued at roughly $40, so it's not a bad prize. And again, additionally, you'll also get an item valued up to $25 from the 5 Reasons store if you're in first place. So check it out, betteredge.com. Use the code 5RSN. All right, we certainly know how to milk a topic. So we are not closing this up today. We are going to engage all of you on this a little bit, those of you who are with us. Alex and I put together our lists of roughly the top 10 pro athletes in South Florida sports history. The list that we put together, and this is all sponsored by our friends over at Jerseys 305. We'll tell you more about them in a second. They've got a great they have a great promo here for the Panthers playoffs, which we're going to tell you about. But essentially, we set this one guideline. You had to have been with a South Florida team for at least 3 years. So no one-hit wonders, no pudge. Basically, this eliminates a whole bunch of Marlins. It also eliminates like Lamar Odom if you were considering putting him on your list. A couple of Panthers players as well who were kind of flashes in the pan. And also for the Dolphins, not as many actually for the Dolphins that were kind of 1 and 2 year guys, which is surprising because again in the NFL there is a lot more transients, but not many of these guys applied. So essentially that was the only real stipulation. Everything else could be up to our own interpretation. So Alex, I will tell you as we introduce you here, I will tell you kind of what my qualification was.
Okay.
How much will this person be remembered?
Yeah, and that influenced my top 3 quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I may have gone against the grain on this a little bit because I know when we first brought up this topic about a week ago, some people were like, well, forget about hockey players because it's hockey in South Florida, but also like, they're still in it to potentially win a Stanley Cup. I think that would change a lot of opinions on where hockey stands in South Florida. I definitely had a harder time for the reasons you stated, including Marlins. I think I'm pretty set on my 10. I think what I'm still kind of working on is I'm still working on the order for some of these.
Yeah.
It's kind of where I'm at, and I don't think there's any Marlins in my draft right now, which some people may have a problem with, but it is what it is.
Well, good. Okay, actually, that will give us something to take off on. So we'll get to the order in a second. I want to get to the overall list here. All right. So basically, we have 4 teams. We're not taking Hurricanes here. Okay. So right. I mean, they may have acted like a pro team for a long time, but no. Okay. So I know that's your area, Alex, but we went with Heat, Dolphins, Marlins.
It's good. It's good we're not including them. Otherwise, I would have had 10 Hurricanes on my
Correct. That's exactly what you would have had. We're also not including Inter. Because they're not here long enough, and because it would end up being Messi, and Messi has not been here 3 years, and he's not ours. I mean, he's kind of ours. I mean, he's playing across from Extreme Action Park, but I mean, which I'm sure was a dream of his as a child growing up. Up in Argentina.
Those railroad tracks there that you have to drive over.
No, and they just did reopen the trampoline park, so you might see Messi in there sometime. But and my daughter is reminding me of that. But I still don't think, again, that we can really claim it. So let's start with this, and at some point I'll have to reach down for the pen that I just dropped. But, okay, I went sort of team by team, all right? So I'm going to give you some of mine. You tell me, without giving me your order, because we're going to get to the order really more on Thursday. You tell me if
good
these
because my order sucks right now. But yeah, I'll tell you.
Good. Well, we're going to work on that together. But I'm going to give you my 3 givens on the Heat side. Okay, 3 givens: Wade, LeBron, and Zoe.
They're all on my list.
Okay. I'm going to give you my 3 givens on the Dolphins side: Marino, JT, and Zach.
Yeah, they're all on my list as well. I did include one other in addition to those 3.
Okay, and we can make an argument for one other for sure. On the Marlins list, I understand that you don't have anybody. Here's the issue with the Marlins. Okay, if you go to their all-time hitting leaders, you'll see the same names over and over. All right, it's basically Stanton, Hanley, Miggy, and Chef, with a little bit of Luis Castillo mixed in. Okay, it's basically those 5. Charles Johnson is not on a lot of those lists. Now, I know that some might associate him as kind of a core Marlin, and the other one who's not is Jeff Conine. And to me, Conine is just not a qualifier for me. He was not good enough at any one time, and I hate to say it, but that's kind of my disqualifier on
Isn't he like Conine? It's and not to the same degree. I'm not making a direct comparison, but he's a little bit like Udonis Haslem for the Marlins,
that's what I'm
where
saying.
he's like it's like half player, half mascot, right? And
I don't want to use the word mascot, not around UD, but yes, he's he's a franchise icon, but not necessarily an all-time franchise great player. I mean, Conine came back. UD never left. Conine was part of a championship. Actually, he was part of 2, right? Yeah, he was part of 2.
Yeah, he was part of both. Both. Yeah.
So I understand, but I just think you have to be at a certain level. Like if Jeff Conine's at a golf tournament, okay, people are, oh, there's Jeff Conine. Wow, cool, Mr. Marlin. But like, there's not a crowd being drawn. Like that's the thing. Right. So to me, it's kind of like, okay. UD, there is a crowd being drawn, and I actually think there is a case that can be made there, but I'm going to just use this to eliminate Conine. So, again, if you look at the Marlins, it really comes down to this. There can't be any pitcher on it when the all-time pitching wins leader is Ricky Nolasco, okay? So regardless, I don't know if he still is. Did Sandy pass him? I'm not sure. But was
Dontrell Willis here for more than 3.5 years?
But second in wins. I see. I would argue that Dontrell was the most electric pitcher. Was the most others are going to say Jose. Okay, so Jose or Dontrell. And obviously, if Jose had lived, he would have well passed anybody on this list and would be top 10. I think.
Yeah, it's true.
And if you're just simply talking about a sensation in this town, he's top 5. So, then I look at the rest of this list. I'm like, okay, D-Train, that was a magical summer, really. And then he had one more great year to follow it up. And then he declined. And then he was traded, and he wasn't even the core piece of the trade. So that's Aaron says Jose would make this list if he was still alive and not traded. I agree with that.
I mean, he raises a good point. He probably would have been traded at some point. I hate to say it, but
Right. So, but he had already qualified for the 3 years. Had he not? I believe for our list, I'll have to take it.
He might have. It was in that. It was right in that neighborhood. So he might have.
Okay. So if you're talking about a longevity guy, it was Castillo. But for me to put Luis Castillo in the top 10 athletes of South Florida sports history, when most people would know him if he would still walk down the street, I can't.
Well, the ones on the Marlins that I strongly considered, and maybe I can revisit before I make my final draft. But
that's why we're doing an extra day, right?
Yeah, I considered Miguel Cabrera, and I did consider Dontrell. Obviously, like in the case of Cabrera, like Detroit probably would claim him more, and he played how many different teams that he played for. So you don't really necessarily outside of South Florida think of him as a Marlin, but he was probably
but here's the issue with Cabrera, because again, the take Hanley off. Okay, So basically, if you look at and I can't give it to Charles Johnson because again, it's a little bit like a Conine thing. Although I think Charles Johnson was actually a better player, but that you can't. So it's real, and a lot of the Charles Johnson love was because he went to University of Miami, and so that plays into it for people. Which again, that matters, but I've met CJ. He's a wonderful human being. I just don't know that he commands a room like some of the others we're talking about here. Okay, so
Yeah.
and particularly for his accomplishments down here, he wasn't part of the second championship team. Okay, so yeah, all right. So it basically is Stanton, Cabrera, and Sheffield are all over that list. Okay, here's the problem with Miggy. It's not just that he played a little bit more outside of South Florida. He literally played 16 seasons outside of South Florida and 5 here. So it does feel like a little bit of grifting on our part to claim him, even though he had this remarkable moment and we kind of knew what he was going to become before that ridiculously stupid trade. And Chef is actually the other direction. Chef was here longer than Cabrera. He was here 6 seasons.
Wow, it didn't feel like that long. Wow,
some of it was like he played half seasons. Yeah, and you were younger probably, but also
I was younger. Yeah.
But he had 122 home runs here, which is way behind Stanton.
Wow.
Stanton's home run total is double.
Yeah.
Okay, what anybody else's is. But the thing with Chef is he played longer here than any other team. He played on a ton of other teams, LA,
I didn't realize that.
New York. He played longer in South Florida than he did anywhere else. And so I could be talked into Stanton or Sheffield or Cabrera, but it comes down to the sort of the back of this list. We cannot make an exception for Tyreek. Aaron comes in here on this. That's why we set the rule at 3. Carter comes in here as a championship of difference between Jimmy being on the list or not. All right, so let's pivot back, okay? Because now we've done the Marlins, okay? Now we're going to go to the Panthers, and then we'll introduce jerseys 305, and then we'll kind of narrow this down. On the Panthers list, to me, there's only 4 guys to even consider, all right? One is still playing, which is Barkov. Another is Luongo, who you could argue was the most consistent face of the franchise prior to Barkov and played the most important position. One was Beezer because of that run, but I think still for a lot of people, John Van Beesbrook, and there's some things I would not love to associate with John Van Beesbrook with, but is more associated as a Ranger, I think.
Actually, when I was first formulating my list, I actually I penciled in Beezer, and then I thought about it, but wait, I needed to include Luongo without bumping anybody else. It's like I had to bump Beezer for Luongo. Obviously, I had to bump Beezer for Luongo.
Yeah, so Luongo. So I can't put Beezer on the list when we're struggling to find a reason to put a Panther on, and yet Luongo was better. And then there's Bure, who holds the records for in terms of his short period of time for goals. It was probably the greatest player, just like LeBron was for Miami, to ever really suit up for the Panthers. I can make the case for maybe 2 of these to get in the mix. And I can tell you that one of them for me, if he closes the deal this time, probably sneaks on. I just think that we're seeing that moment here where Sasha Barkov has an opportunity to stamp himself, even though, again, outside of Sawgrass Mills Mall and perhaps downtown Fort Lauderdale, nobody in Miami would recognize him. I just, it's tough.
So for me, I've already got him on my list, but obviously if he, like you said, he finishes, and we're going to have our list finalized before the Stanley Cup playoffs are over, but
before the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs are over, yes. Or the 2026, but yes. We'll get it done eventually. Go ahead.
But so how they finish this season is gonna, you could potentially move him higher on my list is the way, because I've already got Barkov on mine. I've got Barkov and Luongo on mine, and obviously Luongo's static. He can't move any higher than he is now. Of course, he's retired,
right?
But Barkov could climb.
Okay, and that's fair. And again, then some people would say to you that there were Marlins players here who actually made more of an impact in their short time in terms of the overall fan psyche here than any of the Panthers do.
And the Marlins actually did win championships, and the Panthers have not.
They did, but the one guy that I might pick for the Marlins who was the biggest sensation was Stanton going for 60+ homers, and yet he didn't win anything. And so it's kind of like, all right, you've got Chef won. Cabrera won. I mean, Cabrera won as a rookie, but he had a moment in that series. So it's kind of like I'm coming back to this, like Dontrell, just because he left so quickly, and obviously Jose because of his circumstances, don't get on the list. Although in terms of sensations, I think both would. If you were to say top 10 South Florida pro sports sensations, but But I think you're back to Stanton, Miggy, and Chef and kind of making a decision like to any of these guys. And they all have a plus and a minus here. But here, before I want to do this, though, okay? Let's introduce Jerseys 305, and then we're going to get back into the two big teams. Because to me, this becomes the guys in the big teams who obviously have drawn the most attention, who would draw the most attention if any of them stepped into a room, okay? Do those guys outweigh all the others that you just say no Panthers and Marlins? I think some actually in our listening audience, viewing audience would say. All right, we introduce the sponsor, and then we're going to tell you about a great promotion that they got going on.
Hey, it's Ethan Skolnick for the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We've got a great new sponsor that fits with us perfectly. It's called jerseys305.com. That's jerseys305.com. This is your home for dead stock and vintage jerseys from the Heat, Panthers, Dolphins, Marlins, and the other local teams. Their mission was born from a passion for wearing jerseys of the old styles and the past players. Jerseys 305 aims to make every fan stand out from the crowd with unique pieces that you don't commonly see anymore. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but not today. And Jerseys 305 was created by the fans, for the fans. They're diehards just like you. In fact, they're probably listening to this episode right now. So check them out, Jerseys 305, their partnership with 5 Reasons Sports, celebrating with a 10% discount on the next purchase using the code 5 at checkout. Unlock your exclusive savings on the entire vintage collection.
All right, so let's get into the two big teams here. But before we do, I do want to mention Jerseys 305. You can find them at jerseys305.com or jerseys_305 on Instagram, which is where he's dropping these. Any of the jerseys that are his, they have a promo. If you buy before game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals and the Panthers win the Cup, okay? So before, and I'm talking about the Panthers Rangers series, not the Celtics Pacers series. Panthers Rangers series, he will refund the entire purchase amount.
Wow! Oh, that's tremendous.
So go on to jerseys_305 if you're a Panther fan. Check it out. See the jerseys that he's got available there. He's been posting them on his stories. And again, if they win the Cup, if they finish the deal, it's 2 more rounds, he'll refund everything. So there you go. That's awesome. So make sure that you check that out. All right, so let's go back through the Heat list here. All right. Who would be 4? I mean, you have those 3. I don't know who your third is, but I identified Wade, LeBron, Zoe to me. And the Zoe thing to me is inarguable. He was the first star for that team, the first legit star. He was the foundation, and then he came back and he won. And his 13 minutes of that game 6 were a major reason they won. And so, to me, it's Zoe. He's still in the organization. It's still Zoe. You walk into a room and it's Zoe. Okay, I have him ahead of Shaq. I have him still ahead of Jimmy, ahead of Timmy, ahead of CB, ahead of UD, and ahead of the one guy on the roster other than Jimmy, who I think could be on this list at some point, and for some he may be already. But anyway, let's. Who would be your 4th for the Heat?
Yeah, so this is there are 2 names that I struggled with to decide who's my 4th. I give the slight edge, and I have my reasons I'll talk about, but I give the slight edge to Bosh over Jimmy. And I just feel like Bosh, created, I think in a lot of ways, more of an emotional attachment to Heat fans than LeBron. Like I understand LeBron, obviously the better player. He was a bigger part of the championships, but I feel like the South Florida kind of culture just really embraced Bosh's Renaissance man personality, all the different interests that he had. Not to mention, like there was so much gratitude, like when LeBron decided to go back to Cleveland, and Bosh was financially well compensated, but him making that decision to re-sign here, and the only reason why he stopped playing here was they wouldn't let him play anymore. Right. Because of the thrombosis. He would have kept going, and then you really could have maybe seen something special with him and Dragic playing together. So I gave, and it's weird because almost to this point, Jimmy is getting to the point where you, like, in some ways I feel like, man, maybe Jimmy should be ahead of Bosh, but Bosh, even though he wasn't the number 1 guy, got 2 championships here. Jimmy doesn't have any titles here. So it was a difficult one for me, but I kept going back to Bosh in my mind, and I guess the championships were the tiebreaker there for me.
This is going to be our first disagreement.
Okay.
And Chris Bosh is my favorite star athlete I've ever covered. Okay, and I'll say that as a person.
I get it.
And again, I was there from day one with JT and Zach and developed relationships with both, and I was there with Dwyane Wade from day one. I'm old. It wasn't called the Chris Bosh build. This is the Jimmy Butler build.
Okay.
And so here's where I come down. I think you hit on it, where you said, well, he was well compensated to stay, and then he got sick. I think if that group wins, and again, they got to the second round without him, to a 7-game second round without him in 16, it's a different conversation. But it was never that group, because I covered a date, was never about Chris Bosh, even though he was the most interesting character on the team. And was critically important. And as Spo and Haslem and others have said, their most important player in a lot of ways, because nobody could replicate what he did, whereas Dwyane and LeBron could replicate what they did. I have Jimmy next, and I have him ahead of Shaq. And
so do I. Shaq didn't make my top 10. Spoiler alert.
I think some would disagree with that, and I think he may sneak onto mine. And I think a lot of this is colored by the way he left. But I also have to.
Well, not only the way he left, but it's like outside of Miami, nobody associates Shaquille O'Neal with the Miami Heat outside of Miami. Like
it's
nobody.
True.
Like it's obviously it's mostly Lakers. Although he played for he played Cleveland, Boston, started his career, and I know some people who remember him most as a Magic player because that's where he started his career.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I also remember when he first came, and I remember the 18-wheeler, and I remember the spraying people with it. And, remember, they were coming out of a little bit of a dark age there. There were 2 bad years, and then there was that fun year. But Shaq made them a national team again. And also, look, whether he was a decoy or not, in a lot of ways he was, he delivered. He promised a championship. They got a championship. He was arguably the MVP the year before.
Yes.
Probably should have been Nash. Yeah. But I will say the reason I have Jimmy ahead of him is because I do think this town has embraced Jimmy's personality. He has sort of set the culture tone for I understand the issues this past, that we're talking about right now, the extension and availability and all that. But this is always going to be remembered. This is Jimmy Butler build. Jimmy Butler is putting Shaq didn't really leave an imprint in Miami, neither did Bron. Jimmy's literally putting coffee shops in Brickell. Like there is a certain association with this town. I wish he did more charity work down here. Honestly, he still does some in Chicago, and he embraced that kind of stuff the way that, say, Dwyane and Zoe did. But Jimmy Butler comes in a room in Miami anytime in the next 20 years, and people are going to run to that room. Like it is just he has that kind of charisma.
But they wouldn't. They would run to the Bosh room too.
They would. And again, this is a weird argument for me to make because, I have this great relationship with Chris, and I get it, but he was always the third guy. And Jimmy is the first guy. And we can say, well, he hasn't won a title, but literally he dragged their ass to the finals twice and nearly a third time.
That's true.
I have a hard time. Now, the others, I think Dragic is one of the most popular athletes in South, one of the most likable.
I couldn't put him in. I'd like to.
Can't put him on top 10.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, again, we mentioned UD, who I think for some would make some sense. And then there's Bam, who is on that trajectory, provided he signs this extension, stays till the end of it, and keeps improving. He is. They call him the next face of the franchise for a reason, and I don't think he's going anywhere. So he's on there. But to me, Jimmy's on the top 10 list, and Shaq's on the top 10 list. CB is one of those that I'm sort of debating with these Panthers and Marlins guys.
It's like the big problem that I had, because I think we would both agree that however we order them, if I have Bosh first, you have Jimmy first, we both agree that Bosh and Jimmy are ahead of Shaq. And then the problem I ran into, again, it's a top 10. I wanted to include some non-Heat Heat Dolphin players, so it's like, man, I wish it was a top 12 and Shaq would have made it.
Right. Because Shaq is the type to get offended by a list like this. But let's pivot to the Dolphins here, as we're going to kind of wrap on who we have to actually consider to order next time.
Yeah.
I had Larry Zonka next, and the reason for that is that
You mean Larry Zonka after
Marino, JT, and Zach?
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
same here. Yeah.
Okay, and to me, the reason for that is when you talk about those teams, you say who was the face, the personality of those teams. It wasn't Bob Greasy. It was Larry
Right,
Zonka.
because they did most of that and he did finish out in the Super Bowl, but most of that season was Bob Greasy was injured and Earl Morrall was the quarterback.
Correct.
Zonka was the constant.
Correct. So I would have him there. Now, if we're just talking about pure greatness in a Dolphins uniform, Dwight Stevenson is probably 2.
Yeah. Oh man,
right?
He's not on my list. Yeah.
Right. He's probably the second greatest player for his position that's ever been here 3 years or more. Like and Dwight's it was a great human being, all the rest of that. But if he walked in a room, most people this generation would not know who he was. And he only played 6 or 7 years before retiring, but he probably at his particular position, if you're talking about where he ranks all time, he and Marino are the highest. Now, if you're talking about dynamic ability, and I know someone asked about Tyreek, we can't put him on the list because he's been here 2 years now. After this year, particularly if they close it off by actually winning a playoff game, then that's a different conversation. But Warfield and the Marx Brothers could all be considered. The problem the Marx Brothers have is each other. I would say Clayton over Duper.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
And Warfield, again, probably just as associated with Cleveland. Right.
Yeah, it was I think it was like, did he play? I know it was either equal or he played more with Cleveland. I think he started and ended with Cleveland and played with the Dolphins in the middle. But he was part of the 72 team, so he probably should be more associated with the Dolphins.
A team that never threw too. Like, so it's kind of rarely threw.
Yeah.
So that one is tough for me. I mean, you've had other greats who've come through here, whether it's Junior Seau, et cetera, short term, not really Dolphins or known as Dolphins. Is there any gimme for the top 10 among these guys for you? Is Zonka in?
Zonka's in my top 10 because it's like, obviously, and this is going to happen even with you and me, that there's going to be a certain amount of generational or the bias, but I did feel like I had to include somebody from the only undefeated team in NFL history. So like I needed to put, and Zonka was the guy to me.
Him over Bonacani, right? I mean, he got into the Hall of Fame faster than Bonacani did.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No disrespect to Bonacani, but Zonka first. Zonka made my list. That was the only one. And again, it might be disrespectful to that team. Obviously, I wasn't born in 72, so there's a little bit of a generational bias on my part. But I watched documentaries about all that. I wanted to include Zonka.
All right. So you tell me then, and then we're going to order these things. And again, I might have a couple of tweaks, but we're going to put.
Yeah,
we'll get to 15 here, and they're going to tie in some jerseys 305 that we're going to debate these 15 going forward. But as far as your current 10 that you were bringing to the table, just give them to me so I have them.
Okay. So I've got Luongo and Barkov from the Panthers.
Okay. No Marlins.
Sorry, Marlins. I've got Marino, JT, Zach, and Zonka from the Dolphins.
Okay.
And I think I may have 11 right now. Actually, I've got Dwyane,
LeBron,
LeBron, Bosch, and Jimmy.
Yes, you do have 11. Now, so let me throw 4 more in the mix here. Okay, that will close. We're gonna put Shaq in. Okay. This is to get to 15. We're going to put Shaq in. We're going to put Stanton in. We're going to put maybe we'll make it 16 and I'll throw Miggy and Chef in to see if anybody bites on that. I can't put Jose again it was too short. I can't put Conan in. And then I'm going to put, you already have CB in there, right? The only other one, I will put UD in.
Yeah, I feel like it's disrespectful not to put him in the mix.
Well, he's kind of the 16th man, right, on a 15-man roster.
Basically.
That's kind of what he was doing for the last few years of his career. So, let's okay. So we'll do, and I know some will say, okay, it should have been Maybe Bure in there instead of one of the Panthers, but I'm going to stick with the ones we've got. I think some might say we should have respected D-Train more, although, again, too short. And I know you'll get some Dolphins people who will say, well, where's Dwight Stevenson, maybe our older crowd, or some of those. I do say it says something remarkable about this town, and some of it is the nature of the shortness of the roster, but that the Heat have been around since 88 and the Dolphins since 66, and we have more on the Heat than the Dolphins. Now, I don't know if that's our bias.
The Heat literally have more championships than the Dolphins do.
True. But it's remarkable, because even if we kept going deeper on this list, we'd probably go.
We could get
with
more.
We would go with more Heat. All right, so that's going to be.
I would. Yeah, if we go far enough down, I would consider Timmy Hardaway certainly.
Yeah.
There's.
I mean, we could throw. I mean, maybe I'll just make this 20 and let everybody else jump into it. But we have our basic 10, so we'll say we're for those of you. We'll put these up. Here's our definites, at least in terms of the top 20, and we're narrowing it. Wade, LeBron, Zoe, Jimmy, Bosch, Marino, JT, Zach, Zonka, Luongo, Barkov, Shaq, Stanton, Miggy, Sheffield, Haslem. I'll put Timmy on there. Dwight Stevenson, and maybe for bleeps and giggles, I'll put on either Bure or perhaps Paul Warfield, and see where it goes. Although I know that's not going to end up being top 10. So an interesting list, a lot of people to go through. Make sure you check out Jerseys 305 Thursday. We're narrowing this thing down and we're ordering it. I'm sure we'll do the Wade Marino debate. I mean, to me, it's kind of not as much of a debate anymore. But yeah, I mean, we'll get into it. I think number 3 will be where this thing gets pretty interesting as we go forward. Thanks to everybody for joining. Appreciate it. Thanks to Alex. And again, thanks to our sponsors. Better Edge, get on that contest. Okay, we got prizes to give away. 305jerseys.com. Have a good one, everyone.